Hello and welcome to the Brutal Iron Gym podcast, where our goal is to cut through the BS and deliver the brutal truth about topics related to health and happiness. So today's topic is about nutrition, and we're going to be discussing how to battle high blood glucose and triglycerides. So recently someone reached out to me and told me that they had gotten kind of bummer news on their blood work, and the blood work showed that they had high blood glucose and they had high triglycerides. And they were asking what they could do about that. And kind of in our conversations, they had given me an idea of what they had planned to do. And some of their thoughts were good. Some of them maybe needed kind of tweaking, a little bit of changing. And then there was an enormous component that they were completely missing out on. So that's going to be your cliffhanger. You're going to have to listen to the rest of this to find out what that component is. But I wanted to kind of go through this. So this will be my answer to that person, so that makes it easy for me, because I can do it this way and then also be able to save this as an answer for people in the future. Okay, let's get started. So, blood glucose is a measure of sugar in your blood. So if you have too much sugar floating around your blood, it's just not good for your body. So they have kind of a recommended amount that is normal. So it is normal to have some. You just don't want to have in excess. And blood glucose also, in like triglycerides, they're things that you can get from what you eat. So often if you notice, blood work has to be done when you're fasted for these things to be shown accurately. Because if you just went and ate, if I drank some Gatorade on the way to get my blood test, my blood glucose is going to be bonkers. But that's only temporary. So once my body would process that from what I ate, it would go back to its baseline. And the baseline is actually what we want to know. Because that's kind of like when your machine is running idle, like when it's just kind of hovering and staying still. Is it under stress at idle, or is it calm and healthy at idle? So that's why we do blood tests fasted, because we get to see what your body is when it's not doing anything, when it's idle. So that's what blood glucose is. It's just sugar in your blood. Triglycerides is a type of fat that is in your blood. And it can be, it's basically, again, kind of like if there's too much floating around, it's not good for heart reasons. And I don't want to get too much into the science of that because I want to focus more so on what we can do to battle this stuff. So triglycerides is just basically excessive fat found in your blood. And that's just like blood glucose is excessive sugar found in your blood. So we have too much sugar and too much fat floating around, and it can lead to complications in like diabetes, heart problems, a whole bunch of kind of like complications to our overall health. And that's why they should be addressed, and they need to be addressed. And our goal would be to address it through nutrition and training or activity rather than medication. So all medicines carry some degree of a side effect or some type of unwanted effect. So if we can kind of handle this stuff, quote unquote, naturally through food and activity, that's going to be always a better option. So part of the reason why blood glucose and triglycerides are more commonly high is kind of with our societal structure nowadays is of overeating and underactivity. So we have high accessibility to high-calorie foods, and we have inactive physical but highly mentally stressful jobs. So we tend to kind of feel, it's a combination we talked about in a podcast recently where people will say they feel too tired to work out. Whenever they really haven't done a lot physical, they were just really highly mentally stressed. So if they looked at their physical activity throughout the day, they may have been active and awake on the phone or, doing whatever they were doing, but they were probably in a sitting position. So it would have been more mental stress that is causing them to feel tired than actual physical stress. So a couple podcasts back, we discussed how to battle mental fatigue versus physical fatigue, and how you can work at overcoming mental fatigue to still be able to get in your physical activity. So a lot of times I have people tell me, I'm just too tired to exercise, and no, they're not. It's the mental fatigue, which is not the same as physical. So somebody will say, it's like, oh, I don't need to exercise, I've been busy all day. Not really. You were awake, but you weren't physically active to the point of like muscular damage, muscular stress, the same type of activity that would be found in a regimented workout. So I have arguments all the time with clients who say, I got a workout in, I worked out in the yard. That does not count, because you worked out, you would have done yard work at whatever capacity your current body was okay with. So you would have worked within the limitations of your current body. Therefore, you would not have forced your body to kind of improve like you would in training. So in training, we have progressive overload, where you continually kind of push your body to new levels. When you work out in the yard or do physical labor, you don't do that. You end up staying within kind of like the upper range of your comfort level. You never push yourself to new levels. So the other complication is there's not a consistency to the work to rest ratio that you'll find in exercise to get the heart health effect. Whereas in typical manual labor done, at a pace we're not paying attention to, it gets us a little out of breath here and there, but it's not the kind of like, again, pushing stress to the upper limits to force our body to adapt and get better. So physical activity out in the yard does not count. I apologize. I don't get to make the rules. I just get to tell you what they are. But physical activity outside does not count. So, okay, there's a whole bunch of information already right there. So, but that's typically what happens now, is we overeat as a society and we under activity physical-wise as a society. So, now that we know kind of what the problem is, how do we fix this stuff? The simple answer is eat less, move more. That's essentially what we're going to talk about for the next 20-some minutes, is the concept of eating less, but specifically what should be eaten less, or how we should eat less, and then move more. How should we move more? There is a very specific way that is beneficial to move as compared to like quote-unquote working out in the yard or general kind of like manual labor type activities. So let's look at nutrition first, because this is a nutrition podcast. Let's get into the details. So in general, we want to control our caloric intake. Now, most people assume they're doing this. They don't count calories, most people, but they assume, I eat pretty much the same things every day. Bullshit. No, you don't. So what ends up happening is you eat the same for 2 or 3 days, then something comes up, you overeat at like a nighttime event, maybe somebody made a really good meal, now all of a sudden you're eating like, 3 portions worth. Maybe you kind of skipped lunch one day because you were super busy, then you overate at dinner that night. The next morning you were still kind of hungry, so now all of a sudden you went out to eat, something you shouldn't have had for lunch, and you kind of overdid your lunch calories, but you still eat your normal supper. So you have one day you're kind of under, one day you're over, and it just kind of bounces around. So when people say I eat pretty much the same every day, no, they don't. So if they were to measure this or mark this on a scale, they would see that it's absolutely not true, that they don't they definitely don't eat the same every day. So anytime I have people do caloric counting, where somebody's learning how to count calories, and they'll do like a 3-day assessment, for example, they'll find throughout those 3 days, they'll say, holy crap, like it was way more different than I expected. And in the process of them having to write it down, they'll usually already start editing their own behavior, because they'll see on paper like, oh shit, I don't have to write this down. So they'll skip a certain food or something. But that's usually what it takes, is somebody having to physically kind of like physically track and monitor what they're doing for them to wake up to the fact of how variable their normal everyday really is. The other thing we have is that people, again, they usually are not measuring calories. So they're just kind of going by how they feel, how their clothes fit, and what the scale says. The problem is that extreme inconsistency from day to day can allow a scale to look the same from day to day, but you're actually going through periods of under-eating, over-eating, like high health, low health. You're kind of like waving back and forth, and the scale just kind of shows you this baseline middle area. So it doesn't show you the peaks and the valleys. And it's in those peaks and valleys that we're often causing the blood glucose and the triglyceride issues. So that's what we want to look at. Is I'm going to give you guys kind of 3 steps you can take to essentially start working at normalizing your caloric intake from day to day. But I think it's important that we know that's why these 3 steps are being taken place. So your real goal would be to develop a diet of improved quality and improved consistency. So if you do those 2 things, eat better foods, and then eat more consistently from day to day, you're going to have a big helpful effect on blood glucose and triglycerides. So the first thing we're going to say that we want to focus on is to even caloric distribution throughout the day. And this is meal timing. So we want to match what we eat to how active we are. So if I'm moving around more, I can eat more. If I'm moving around less, I want to eat less. So we've done podcasts about this concept. It comes up like a million times in our nutrition podcast. But one of them that you might want to check out is podcast number 109, titled Nutrition for Peak Body Composition. So if you have high blood glucose and high triglycerides, you may not want to get down to like a six-pack abs and be like an elite athlete. However, if you eat closer to what it takes to do that, you're going to bring your health closer to like your nutritional health closer to actually healthy. Okay, so podcast number 109 will talk about the concept of meal timing and why it's beneficial, so you can learn more there. But in general, if I put in the amount of fuel that I'm about to burn, and there's timing issues and stuff like this where certain foods digest slower and faster than others. But in general, if I eat at 6 a.m. and I'm going to start to be more active by 9 or 10 or by my next meal, then I want to eat enough calories that gets me to my next meal, but not so much that I didn't need it. Okay? So it's kind of like if I want to think about driving a car and you know you're going to fill up 4 times that day. So if you're driving a car, you know you're going to fill up 4 times. You really all you need is fill up 1 to 2. At number 1, you just need the fuel that gets you to fill up number 2. When you fill up at the second time, you just need the amount of fuel that gets you to filling up the third time. And then the third time, what it needs to get you the fourth. That's the same way with eating. Okay? We want to eat enough calories that gets us to our next meal. And if we have a consistent meal timing from day to day, we'll have a better idea of how much calories that should be day to day. We can eliminate undereating and overeating by being more consistent. So if I know that I eat at, let's just say, really simple example, okay, is at 6 a.m., noon, and 6 p.m. If I do that every day, whatever I eat at 6 a.m. on the first day, maybe all of a sudden by 10 o'clock I'm freaking famished and I'm kind of like getting a little bit like hungry and peckish. I'm kind of getting a little tired. I realize, okay, I might have undereaten. So maybe tomorrow I can eat a little bit more. So you eat a little bit more at 6 o'clock tomorrow. You find out that got you what you needed to get to 12. And then you can do that every day and you can be more consistent. The problem is if you eat one day at 6, 12, and 6, the next day at 6, 9, 2:30, 8:30 at night, the next day you skipped breakfast for some reason because you were busy, then you ate like something at 9 o'clock, but you got real busy in the afternoon, then you didn't eat till supper. That is so ridiculously inconsistent that there's no way you're going to know whether you're under eating or overeating because you're taking a big fat guess every damn time. And since you don't normally do this as a part of your life, you're probably not going to be very good at guessing. So if I were to have to eyeball the amount of fuel it would take me to drive, say, 250 miles, I promise you that I have no freaking clue what that is. So, because I don't do that every day. I look at nutrition every day, so I'm actually pretty damn good at guessing at that. But if it's not my normal, I'm not going to be very good at guessing at that. And that's actually kind of what happens for most people, is they undereat, overeat, and we just kind of yo-yo back and forth in those periods. And it's in those overeating periods that we tend to kind of do more of those than we do the undereating, which is why we gain weight. And that's why we also have excess blood sugar and excess fats in our blood, because we're kind of eating more than we really need. Our body's having a hard time kind of processing and clearing it all by the time we pile in even more food. So, number one thing is to kind of match your calories in versus calories out. So you want to even your caloric distribution throughout the day. So what that means is if I'm going to eat like say a certain volume of food, and let's say it turns out to be 800 calories at breakfast, I'm going to eat 800 calories at lunch and about 800 calories at supper. So that's the most basic way to even out your calories, is to just make them all pretty equal. Then once you got good at that, you would start to realize, okay, I'm a little more busy at the middle of the day than I am at the very beginning or at the evening. So maybe I only need 600 at breakfast and 600 at supper, but I might need 1,000 at lunch. And that's actually what you start to do. So if we think of our activity level throughout the day, it would follow a bell curve. So it would be low at the beginning when we wake up. It starts to get higher and higher to like kind of the middle of the day, and then it starts to taper down by the end of the day. Your food, your caloric intake should match about that same bell curve. So that once you get used to doing just a similar amount at every meal, the next advanced step would be to match your calories in that bell curve kind of shape. Okay? So that's the first thing. So go listen to podcast number 109, and I'll tell you a little more about that if you'd like to know. Number 2, the second thing we want to look at is pairing sugar foods with proteins. So we want to kind of like, if we know blood glucose, excess of sugar is an issue, we want to kind of watch how much sugar we eat throughout the day. Doesn't mean you can't have any sugar. Actually, for fat loss, sometimes fruit is a great thing. So you can still have healthy forms of sugar, which would be like fruits, for example, but you want to get rid of like candies and sodas and junky sugars. Now, anytime you have sugar, you want to pair it with a protein, and that'll help kind of curb the blood glucose spike that would follow from that meal. So anytime you pair sugar with protein, it blunts the dumping of the sugar into your bloodstream. It kind of extends that out, and it gives your body a better chance to kind of process all that glucose rather than all the glucose getting flooded right away. So the protein kind of slows that down. So podcast number 53, titled Controlling Blood Sugar, we took a really in-depth look at that. So go listen to that podcast, especially if you have blood glucose issues and or are pre-diabetic or even diabetic now. Okay, so that would be the second thing, is you want to watch how much sugar you eat throughout the day, and when you do eat sugar, pair it with a protein food. Okay, and if you don't know what foods are high in protein, just Google that, foods high in protein, so that way you can learn more about that. We do have a protein podcast in the past, so you can look that up too. So, but that's kind of rules number 1 and 2. 1 is kind of match your calories in to your calories out. Number 2 is pairing sugars with proteins. Number 3 would be to limit your highly fatty meals. So, if your body has trouble clearing fat from your blood, well, it's probably not a good idea for us to just dump a shit ton of fat in our blood system at one big meal. So if you're going to sit down and have a meal of endless fried chicken wings, probably not the best idea when you have triglyceride problems, okay? So you want to avoid foods that are really high in fat and having excessive amounts of them. It doesn't mean you can't eat any fat at all in your diet. By no means does it mean that. It just means you want to spread that stuff out throughout the day, and you want to try to eat healthier fats rather than bad fats, okay, or the saturated nasty fats that cause the heart problems. So unsaturated healthier fats have more kind of functions in our body, and they have less negative effect on your heart. So podcast number 29, titled If I Eat Fat, Will I Get Fat? That talks about in more detail what are the best types of fat sources, and kind of gives you an idea of how much throughout the day fats you should eat. So the reason why I give these podcasts rather than just giving you the answers now is because each of those podcasts is like 20-some minutes. So I can't take 20 minutes in every single title here, so our podcast would last over an hour. So I wanted to give you guys these basic introductions to the rules, then give you the podcast that if you want to apply that rule, you can learn a little more about if you'd like. Okay? So those are the big 3 things we want to look at nutritionally. Is we want to even our caloric distribution throughout the day. Make sure that if we're putting fuel in, we're using the fuel. So avoid eating a bunch of food late at night when you're not going to be using it. Try to eat more food during the day and less food at night if that matches your activity level. Okay? Second thing is pair sugars with protein. So you want to reduce the amount of sugar in your diet to really just natural sugars like fruits and just whatever sugar comes in good healthy foods. But you want to avoid soda, candy, crap like that. Okay? And by pairing your sugars with proteins, it helps kind of reduce that blood glucose dumping effect and can help regulate your blood glucose levels throughout the day. Then also, number 3 was to limit highly fatty meals. So we want to focus more on healthy fats rather than bad fats. And you want to try to evenly distribute out your fat throughout the day just like you would with your calories. So the nice part is once you learn how to do this, all these things kind of all take care of each other. So if you even out your caloric distribution, you're automatically going to even out your fat intake. And you're also going to probably end up eating healthier foods and avoiding some of those sugars. So, in general, our kind of summary of what we're trying to do here, like we said, is improve quality and consistency of our food. And what we mean by quality is if I'm going to have sugars, let's have them from fruits rather than from like soda, so stuff like that. So rather than having nasty, fatty kind of meals with like saturated fried foods, maybe we can rather have it with oils and avocados and nuts and healthy type of fats. So our body has a better chance to use that stuff up. So we do have I've talked about it in the past podcast, a smiley face chart. So that will help you track good food versus bad food versus missed meals. So it helps you develop consistency and it helps you develop higher quality of food intake. So if you would like that chart, shoot us an email at brutalirongym@gmail.com and we will send you that chart. Okay? So put those things into effect. And those nutrition changes alone will have a pretty good response. But what about, we said at the very beginning, the simple answer for this is to eat less and move more. What about that move more component? That is actually kind of like our ace up our sleeve for how to take care of blood glucose and triglycerides. So, we have done a podcast number 181, titled Using Muscle Damage for Fat Loss. And this talks about awesome detail about why if you do activity, physical activity, that creates muscular tissue damage, your body will actually burn up more blood glucose and triglycerides within the process of fixing that muscle. So the more muscle I beat up in being active through, like, say, resistance training as compared to running or general kind of cardio stuff, the more muscle damage I create, the more I can actually eat. And the more my body actually burns up of what I do eat. So this was the problem that I said at the very beginning when the person who was telling me about this problem, they were having blood glucose and triglycerides, they were telling me what they were going to do nutrition-wise, but they never mentioned training. So they thought, I'll be more active, I'll try to do this or that. Bullshit. You're just going to do, if anything, they might do some more work around the yard. They're going to walk for like the first week or two at lunch, but then that's going to go away because it's not a normal part of their life. Okay? So instead, if we get into resistance training in some manner, you can just buy some dumbbells at home. You don't even have to go to a gym. So even for some people, just bodyweight squats will kind of wear you out. Bodyweight squats, push-ups, and like plank variations, that'll beat the crap out of your muscles enough if you've never worked out. So you don't even need equipment to train at home. And if you're brand new to this, it can only be 10 minutes. 10 minutes 3 or 4 times a week can be plenty to make a difference. 10 freaking minutes, okay? That's all it takes. So, that's the idea, is if we do physical activity that causes muscular damage, you are going to use up more of the sugars and the fats that you already eat. So if you're already working on reducing those, and you add muscular-based activity in, bam, you get everything taken care of. That's the big effect. And then the second thing that is extremely important, so this is for males and females. Okay, I want you to listen up here. Is as you get older, because usually blood glucose and high triglycerides is an older person problem. No offense coming from the young punk 35-year-old, but it usually kicks in like later in life, in your 40s, 50s, 60s, stuff like that. That's whenever these kind of come into effect. Typically, if people respond by a caloric reduction-based response, so they just reduce the calorie intake in their food, they will slowly lose muscle tissue. Then you become a weak, feeble adult, like older senior citizen. So all of a sudden you start losing muscle in your legs. You start losing muscle in your upper back. Start losing muscle in your lower back. Where for a lot of guys, that's your power. That's where you get all your strength from. Should be your hips and your butt, by the way, but it's not. So it's probably going to be your lower back. So if you just continually reduce calories and you never introduce the resistance training component, you're going to actually be dieting off muscle tissue at the same time you're dieting off fat. So your blood work might turn out to be healthy, but then all of a sudden you're going to be freaking weak as hell and you can't do anything around the house. You're going to feel like that old person who kind of can't do anything anymore, and you're just going to say, I'm too old to do this, I'm too old to do that. All of a sudden you don't go out in the yard and do all the activities you normally do. You sit in the house, get old, get inactive, even more inactive, and then since you're even more inactive, you reduce your calories even more. So, it's just kind of like a crappy little spiral. If we do resistance training, you can defeat that. So here's a quick little tidbit if people don't know. My mom is 61 years old. She started lifting weights when she was 47. She was whatever kind of no actual exercise regimen, before 47. She was active with like some kids in her daycare business, so like playing around with the kids all day. But it wasn't like resistance training. There was nothing like other than just kind of running around, playing some basketball or kids games. That was it. At 47, she started lifting weights. By 50, she did a bodybuilding show, actually, believe it or not. And now at 61 years old, my mom, she's only like, I think, 5'2". I think she weighs around like 130 to 140 pounds. And she can squat 265 pounds, bench 135, and deadlift 305. So at 61 years old, she is the strongest she has ever been. Okay? At 61 years old. And she never touched a weight until she was 47. So, if I were to tell you, like, oh, my mom's 6 years old, she can deadlift 300, you'll probably be like, this guy owns a gym, his mom probably was fit her whole life. Nope. So, she didn't start until she was 47. And, like I said, she's now the oldest she's ever been, but she's also the strongest she's ever been. So, what's awesome for my mom is she got her blood work back recently. It looked great. And she is getting older and better. Better. That's the key part. So none of us can do anything about the getting older part. So every second that ticks away, we all get older. But it's awesome to know that there's really no limit to when you can get strong. So people can get strong in their 40s, their 50s, their 60s, even their 70s. I've trained a ton of 70-year-olds. Okay? So kicking in resistance training at any point in your life is beneficial. And it can make a huge difference. And here's to top this off, is if you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so weak, why would I even start? The weaker you are, the more important it is to do it. And the bigger effect you're going to get for whatever effort you put in. So think about this. If somebody is truly pathetic at something, and they put in a small amount of effort, they can at least become less pathetic. If somebody's advanced and they put a small amount of effort in, that really doesn't make any difference. So, lucky you, the more pathetic you are at lifting weights, the more effective it's going to be that you do it. So that's going to be a big thing. So resistance training, the muscle damage that's created while resistance training is what helps burn up excessive glucose and fat in your blood. That does not happen with traditional cardio. Okay? You have to have things that cause muscular damage. It's going to make a big effect for you. And it helps keep you stronger as you get older. Cool? Okay, so real quick, 4-step summary to all this craziness is to eat to match your activity levels. So match your calories in to calories out. Eat less fatty, kind of dense foods in meals, and eat less sugar, but when you do eat sugar, pair it with proteins. And lastly, lift weights. So do some resistance training. If you put those 4 steps together, your blood glucose will come down, your triglycerides will come down, you will feel healthier, be healthier, look healthier, you are healthier. Okay? So give this stuff a try. I promise it works. I've seen it work hundreds of times. So this is the steps for battling high blood glucose and triglycerides. Cool. Now, if you listen to this and you have any extra questions, shoot us an email at brutalironGym@gmail.com and we'll help you out. Okay? So good luck to you. If you like this information, you can find more from us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Brutal Iron Gym. Also, if you like the podcast, please share it with family and friends. So the more people we help, the happier the world will be. And if you have any questions, feedback, or suggestions, we would love to hear from you. So the podcast is for you, so we want to know what you want to learn about. Okay? And you can reach us at our email at brutalironGym@gmail.com. As always, I hope this was helpful, and thank you for listening.